All right, I want to address a matter that's sticking in my craw. I just got finished talking about Bret Easton Ellis's work, so this is the right time to do it, I guess. Uh, of course, Bret Easton Ellis's book that is most discussed is American Psycho. By far, it's the one that gets the most attention, and as we all know, his character Patrick Bateman has become this iconic figure. And a lot of this is due to the 2000 movie with Christian Bale, which has become this cult classic. So that's just setting the stage here. But in the last, I would say, 5 to 7 years that I've heard people discussing American Psycho online, or I guess it's mostly been hearing people talk about it online rather than in real life, because I haven't heard that many other haven't had that many people have that many discussions in meat space over American Psycho. But this notion has gained ground until just up to up to about now. It's like almost all that you ever hear about American Psycho when people are analyzing American Psycho. I shouldn't say, I'm exaggerating a little, because people talk about the satire of the culture and other things, and some of the Patrick Bateman bon mots get a lot of attention. But there's this, oh, you know what, man? You know what? What if it's all in his head? What if Patrick Bateman never killed anybody? I bet he didn't even kill anybody. It goes from what if to it's the truth. It's the only way to possibly interpret this story, is that he didn't actually kill anyone because he's an unreliable narrator, and so therefore it's all in his head. Let me just take things one at a time, because I feel like a voice crying in the wilderness right now. I wouldn't have minded if there were a few people out there who were just sort of saying maybe this is the case. And it wouldn't bother me at all if people were saying, sometimes the book lapses into the realm of the surreal or the fantastic. There are certain passages that are clearly not meant to be taken as really happening. Patrick Bateman thinks that a park bench is following him home. That's just one example of what I'm talking about. And there's a whole passage where he's like getting chased by police, and then he kills a policeman, and then more police follow him, and then he's running away, and then he shoots a night watchman, and like he's shooting everybody in his path, and you think it's gonna culminate in this shootout, where they're going to finally take him down, and then in the next chapter or so things return to normal again. So clearly, during a passage like that, clearly we're seeing Patrick lapse into insanity or into delusion. And yes, he is an unreliable narrator. But the problem with the unreliable narrator thesis is a lot of people take it as liberty, or take it as license to just impose anything, any harebrained idea on the story, on the character, because because the narrator is unreliable. And I've known, I'm an English teacher. I don't currently teach English, but as I've said before, just like with the Marines, if you're an English teacher, you remain an English teacher for the rest of your life. You never are. There's no such thing as a retired English teacher. So, as an English teacher, I've taught literature before, including stories with unreliable narrators, and the one who specialized, the author who specialized the most in stories involving unreliable narrators was Edgar Allan Poe. As far as I'm concerned, there are probably others who wrote a lot in that format as well, but he's the one, I think, who really a great many of his famous short stories are written by an unreliable narrator. But when people read The Telltale Heart, for example, they don't think to them, which is written by somebody who's like losing his mind and who's not all there, decides to kill an old man that he loves, that he has nothing against, because his eye just looks so weird and creepy. It has this film over it, and so he sets out to murder this old man under aggravated circumstances, like opening the door to his room and making his presence known and scaring him, and doing all these kinds of things that you wouldn't think you would do if you really love this person, and having to kill somebody just because of his eye, right? We know that doesn't make sense. That we're not talking to a person who's thinking reasonably. But for all that, we don't say to ourselves, I've never heard somebody interpret The Telltale Heart by saying, oh, well, that must mean that it's all in his head. That must mean that what we think has happened in this story hasn't actually happened in this story. I don't know if you can hear the car alarm that's just going off next to me here. Okay, just stopped. Because normally that sound is I think more muted than I think it is, or it has been on previous occasions. All right, so anyway, this is all preamble. There have been stories with unreliable narrators where nobody has gone from point A to point, has just leapt off the cliff and said, well, how do we know that anything is real? He's an unreliable narrator, right? He might just be walking on a beach somewhere, making all this stuff up, and there's nothing like that. No, even though he's an unreliable narrator, what he tells you he does in the story is still reliable in the sense that he's we trust that this stuff is happening. Unless something happens in the story, unless there's some indication in the story that brings that whole notion into question. Okay. Now with American Psycho, it seems like what people have done is they've gone from two things. There have been two things that happen in the book that make them go from from Patrick Bateman as an unreliable narrator to not clearly he hasn't killed anyone, and clearly all the murders are just in his head, which is so fucking annoying. I think that the credulosity, if that's even a word, with which this whole thesis has spread from reader to reader, and people think they're being so cool and so edgy and so, wow, I've got this crazy far out way of looking at American Psycho, and it's not. It's just dumb. It's stupid. It doesn't hold water in my view. Okay, so the two things that they cite are, first of all, there's the passage, and I think this applies to both the book and the movie. The book and the movie have a lot of differences. The book is a lot more upsetting to read. It's a lot more explicit. There are more detailed accounts of murder, torture scenes than in the movie. But anyway, the book and the movie have this in common. In both the book and the movie, there is a scene that's clearly not real. There's a scene where Patrick Bateman goes on this murderous rampage, and in the movie, it starts with an ATM machine telling him to feed it a cat, right? And that's a clue that he's not in his right mind. And then he starts shooting a bunch of people, shoots a police officer, shoots a night watchman, and he's being followed around by policemen, and he's hiding out, and helicopters are flying overhead. And then, as I said, things just go on after that scene that seems to be building towards some sort of big climax with a confrontation with the police. And then after that, nothing is different. So clearly that scene is not real. Okay. Clearly that scene is getting into Patrick's psychosis. All right. His psychotic mind. His deluded mind. And I would argue his damned mind, because I think my thesis on American Psycho is that it's a vision of the damned, and Patrick Bateman, it's a vision of hell. It begins with abandon all hope, ye who enter here, and Patrick Bateman is one who dwells in hell, i.e. one of the damned. But I'm not going to go into that right now. Maybe I will another time. Okay, so they cite that one scene as evidence that Patrick Bateman, that maybe he didn't kill anyone, because there's one scene where that's clearly not real, where the murders clearly aren't actually happening. So therefore, all the other scenes where murders are discussed, are recounted, sometimes in appalling detail, in disgusting detail. Therefore, all those other scenes must just be diluted, intruding into Patrick Bateman's deluded mind, and he's not really murdering anyone. Okay, it does not follow that one scene where he's off, where he's clearly deluded, means that all the other scenes where he's killing, that he's not, that he's equally deluded there. That's faulty reasoning. There's nothing to indicate in these other scenes that he's making this up, or that it's all in his head. Okay, in order for you to be able to draw that conclusion, and you could say, hey, it's art, we can interpret it however we want. Well, no, we can't. I'm not a believer in relativism. There are good interpretations and there are poor interpretations of art. And this whole notion that Patrick Bateman hasn't really murdered anyone, I think that's a very, very poor interpretation of American Psycho. So, but anyway, that's the first the first instance of what people use to say that Patrick Bateman didn't actually kill anyone. The second thing is there's a scene in which, he kills his not friend, but his rival. In the book, he's named Paul Owen. In the movie, he's named Paul Allen. Murders him in his apartment, in Paul Owen / Allen's apartment. I'll just call him Paul Allen because he's better known by that name. And then in a later scene, he takes a couple of hookers there and tortures them and murders them there, and hides their bodies there. All right. And the reason why people think, oh, well, maybe he didn't actually kill Paul Allen is because a detective starts talking to him, and the detective says, oh, eventually tells him, what, someone cited Paul Allen in London, so he's not actually dead after all. We thought he disappeared. We thought maybe that he was dead, but he's been cited in London, so he's clearly not dead. Now, interestingly, here is where the interpreters, with the first scene, the interpreters of American Psycho, who use that fantasy sequence as an excuse to say, oh, he didn't really do any of these other things. There they don't. There they just say, well, actually, it's the same thing. It's the same. They're doing the same thing. They're not paying attention to context. Okay, the first, the fact that this one string of murders is obviously unreal, in the realm of the unreal, to coin a phrase, does not mean that all of the other murders that are recounted in the novel are also unreal. There's nothing to hang that upon. Okay. Now, if you if you read American Psycho or watched American Psycho and you didn't pay attention at all to the fact that a common joke in the novel, I'll just stick with the novel right now, a common joke, although it's in the movie as well, a common joke is that Patrick Bateman commonly gets mistaken to be somebody else. And Patrick Bateman commonly mistakes other people to be other people. In other words, it's like this group of Wall Street yuppie types, the men that Patrick Bateman works with and goes out to bars with and drinks with and talks to and has conversations with and stuff. They commonly confuse each other with other people. Patrick Bateman gets misidentified, as Halberstram. This is who Paul Allen thinks he is. He mistakes him for Halberstram, or this other guy named Halberstram. So the joke is that all of these guys kind of look the same and wear the same kind of suits and act the same, and they're commonly mistaken for one another. All right. So we had a scene in the book, and it's a scene in the movie too, where Patrick Bateman murders Paul Allen, and then disposes of does something to his body, does something to dispose of his body. So we saw that he murdered Paul Allen. We saw that. There was nothing to suggest that scene was some mind trip that Patrick was going on. There was nothing in that scene to suggest that Patrick Bateman was deluded. There were no fantastic elements to this scene. It just was a murder scene. It was a gruesome murder, axe murder. Okay. And later, as I said, he keeps the key to Paul Allen's place, and he takes a couple of girls there, a couple of ladies of the evening there, tortures and murders them in that same building. Now here's the scene that all of the Patrick Bateman never murdered anybody people don't pay any attention to. This is the scene that they just all totally ignore. Okay. but it's a scene that's a tip-off that that at least a good many of the murders are indeed real. So what happens in this scene, you ask? Well, it's a couple weeks later, maybe longer. I'm not exactly sure the span of time that it's been, but it's a couple weeks after Patrick has murdered the two prostitutes in Paul Allen's apartment. And he goes to the building because he wants to dispose of the bodies, and he brings this mask with him because he anticipates having to handle decomposed human remains and to deal with to not have to smell rotting flesh and stuff. He brings this surgical mask with him. When he gets to the apartment, the woman who is the realtor answers the door, and she says to him, she's just been showing around this couple. She's been showing this couple the apartment, and Patrick is confused. He says, "Wait, Paul Allen's apartment is for sale? I don't understand." And the woman who's the realtor looks at him strangely and claims not to know any Paul Allen. But this was Paul Allen's apartment, and it was where he had stashed these bodies, and that's why he had come there with this mask. To find a way to dispose of these bodies of these two prostitutes that he'd murdered. So what happens in this scene is the realtor, Patrick is thrown off, not knowing exactly what to think of this turn of circumstances, and the realtor asks him, how did you find out about this apartment? Did you read the ad in the Times? And Patrick says, "Yeah, that's it. That's how I found out. I read the ad in the Times." And the realtor says, "There was no ad in the Times." And then she tells him, "You need to get out of here and not come back." Now, what possible interpretation is there of that scene besides the one I'm about to give you? Okay. The realtor, what you can piece together from the evidence that were given in that scene is that the realtor or her realty group, whatever group owns this apartment, did some kind of check on the apartment because they hadn't heard from maybe Paul Allen hadn't paid his rent. And so they sent someone to come by. Whoever came by found these bodies, these mutilated bodies, this horrific sight. And then they said to themselves, well, if we let it be known that two prostitutes were murdered in this apartment, then the property value is going to go way down. And we don't want that. We don't want the property value to go down. So it looks like the owner has been murdered, and it looks like somebody else took these two girls here and murdered them. Let's just quietly dispose of these bodies, clean up the apartment so that it's good as new. There's no sign of dead bodies, mutilated bodies anywhere. And then we can sell the apartment to somebody else for the value that, we want to sell it for, instead of, it becoming this place where nobody wants to live because these horrific murders took place there, and therefore the property value goes down. Right? If this were not the case, then why would the realtor, tell me, all of you Patrick Bateman didn't murder anybody people, why would the realtor have this exchange with Patrick? What sense would it make for her to have this kind of exchange with Patrick? The realtor realizes that Patrick Bateman must be the guy who's responsible for the murders. Now, the realtor does not want the murders to be known. The realtor wants the murders to remain hidden. So she figures out that Patrick Bateman must be the man who committed the murders, because he just shows up without making an appointment. He says he's in this Paul Allen's / Owen's apartment, and he's got this mask with him, which is awfully suspicious. And then she tricks him by asking, "How'd you find out about this? Was the ad in the Times?" And he says, "Yes, it was the ad in the Times." And she says, "There was no ad in the Times." So who else could he be in her mind but the killer? And that explains why she treats him the way she does after that. She knows that he's the murderer, and she is, of course, appalled by him, repelled by him, disgusted by him, but she's not going to give him away, because if she gave him away, then the property value in the apartment would go down and they would lose money. And think about it. American Psycho is the satire of greed. It's this this book that analyzes greed and the effect it has on society. And it's not just Patrick Bateman and his Wall Street buddies who are greedy. It's this whole society, including the high-rise realtors. So what you figure out from this scene is that she knows who he is. She knows that he's the killer. And that's why she tells him, "I think you better leave now and don't come back." Now, if the murder of Paul Allen, if the murder of the two girls had all been in Patrick Bateman's mind, this scene makes no sense. I'm sorry for my vehemence here. It's just the stupidity of this interpretation, this pseudo interpretation, this quasi interpretation, has been allowed to stand for too long. But you've got to realize that scene makes zero, which is in both the movie and the book, that scene makes zero sense unless Patrick Bateman murdered people in that house, and the realtor knows that there were murdered people in that house and figures out that Patrick Bateman is the murderer, both by the fact that he showed up with a surgical mask, that he knows who Paul Allen / Owen is, and that he lies when she sets this trap for him by asking if he saw the ad in the Times. Okay. So that's why no, the murders were not all in Patrick Bateman's head, and that's a stupid interpretation, and you should stop just parroting that stupid interpretation. And I've just told you why. And if you want to try to argue, I guess you can,
but you've got no leg to stand on. It's over, Anakin. I have the high ground.